For centuries, a sacred resurrection passage sat unread outside Ethiopia, hidden in Ge'ez, untouched by Western hands. Now translated for the first time, it reveals teachings from Jesus himself after the resurrection. Not doctrine, not proof, but transformation. And it changes what we thought Christianity and resurrection were really about. The resurrection translation that shakes the core. What if the story at the heart of Christianity had a chapter most of the world never saw? In 2025, a long-hidden ancient manuscript in Ge'ez, the classical language of the Ethiopian Church, was translated and shared more widely than ever before. This text, preserved in monasteries for centuries, offers a version of the resurrection story with teachings that change how we understand what happened after Day 3. Instead of ending with a quick departure, the resurrected Jesus spends 40 days teaching his followers. These teachings go beyond miracles and instead focus on how a person's perception of life, reality, and the sacred shifts after resurrection. In the words found in the text, "You will see not with eyes closed by fear, but with hearts opened by wonder." This is not a secret gospel in the sensational sense, but a serious, sacred piece of scripture that was simply never translated into languages most scholars can read. The newly translated passages emphasize inner transformation rather than external proof. Jesus isn't just showing that he is alive, he is showing how to live. How a human can begin to see the world with intuition and depth, instead of just logic and rule-following. That emphasis, grounded in daily spiritual practice and direct experience, is very different from the way the resurrection is usually presented in Western liturgies. This translated text doesn't diminish the miracle, it expands it. It suggests that resurrection isn't only an event, something that happened once in 30 to 33 CE, but a process of awakening available to anyone who follows a certain path of devotion. Because this passage was tucked away in Ge'ez for so long, most of the world simply did not know it existed. Now that it has been translated, people are asking, was the resurrection meant to be understood as an inner initiation as well as a historical event? This question sets the stage for an entirely new way of looking at Christian origins, and leads directly into how Ethiopia became a Christian nation long before Rome ever did, which we explore next. Ethiopia became Christian before Rome. Long before Constantine made Christianity the official faith of the Roman Empire in 380 CE, another kingdom had already embraced it as a state religion. In the early 4th century, under King Ezana of Aksum, Ethiopia declared Christianity its official faith, at least 50 years earlier than Rome. What makes this remarkable is that Ethiopia's conversion happened independently. It was not a result of imperial decree from Byzantium or theological councils in 325 CE. Instead, the faith spread through local engagement, personal devotion, and the influence of missionaries like Frumentius, who is remembered in Ethiopian tradition as the first bishop of Aksum. The Ethiopian Church did not mirror Roman Christianity. It developed its own liturgical rhythms, theological vocabulary, and scriptural traditions shaped by local context and ancient languages like Ge'ez and Amharic. It remained outside the political and doctrinal struggles that occupied Constantinople or Rome. In the words of an Ethiopian monk, "Our faith did not arrive on the back of an empire. It grew from the hearts of our people." Because of this independent development, Ethiopian Christianity preserved texts and theological insights that were lost or marginalized in the Western tradition. Their scripture collections included books that never made it into the Western canon, such as Enoch and Jubilees, and the resurrection teachings preserved in the newly translated texts we discussed earlier. This independent path also meant that theological debates in Ethiopia took shape around direct spiritual experience rather than imperial unity. While Rome asked, "How do we unify belief under central authority?" Ethiopia asked, "How do we encounter the sacred directly?" That question shaped every aspect of Ethiopian Christian life, from prayer practices to theological writing. As we turn to the next section, we see how early Ethiopian manuscripts like the Garima Gospels predate much of Europe's Christian art and literature, revealing a Christian culture that was both literate and artistically rich long before Western Europe. The German Gospels, older than Europe's Bibles. Hidden high in the Ethiopian highlands, in stone-walled monasteries where time seems to have paused, are some of the oldest Christian books ever made. Known as the Garima Gospels, these illustrated manuscripts have been dated by radiocarbon analysis to between 390 and 570 CE, making them older than many of Europe's earliest surviving Bibles. These aren't just texts, they're art. Pages made of goat skin, dyed with natural pigments, and bound by hand, each contain vivid depictions of the gospel narrative, drawn in a style unique to Ethiopian Christianity. What makes the Garima Gospels extraordinary isn't only their age, but what they reveal: a literate, devotional, and aesthetic Christian culture existing in Ethiopia while most of Europe was still entering the Dark Ages. In those centuries, European Christianity was focused on survival through tribal wars and the fall of Rome. Meanwhile, Ethiopian scribes were writing and illustrating full gospel books with theological clarity and artistic vision. One monk from Garima wrote, "To draw is to pray with the hand what the mouth cannot say." These weren't created for power or display. They were made for devotion, for meditation, for beauty. These texts also prove that Christianity did not spread from west to east, as often assumed. It blossomed in parallel. The Ethiopian Church wasn't waiting for Roman approval. It was creating a Christian identity rooted in its own languages, its own saints, and its own sacred geography. The Garima Gospels are a visual map of that early faith, showing us that deep Christian tradition existed in Africa independently. And now, as scholars digitize and preserve these works, they're seeing connections between these illuminated Gospels and teachings that would be erased or ignored in the Western canon. Which leads us to a deeper mystery. What else did Ethiopia preserve that the West left behind? The answer lies in entire books that vanished from Western Bibles, but remained intact in Ethiopian scripture. That's what we'll explore next. Books the West forgot, Ethiopia preserved. When the Bible was shaped in the 4th and 5th centuries CE, church leaders had to decide what stayed and what was left out. In the West, that process was as political as it was spiritual. But Ethiopia chose a different path and kept entire books others discarded. Most notably, Ethiopia's Bible includes 1 Enoch and Jubilees, not as footnotes, but as core scripture. 1 Enoch speaks of angels, visions, and divine justice. Jubilees retells Genesis with a sacred calendar and spiritual structure. These texts deeply shaped early Christian thought, especially on prophecy and resurrection. Western leaders rejected them. Too mystical, too complex, too hard to control. But Ethiopia saw them as essential. A monk once wrote, "The eye that sees angels needs no permission from Rome." These books taught how to pray, imagine heaven, and seek transformation, not just follow rules. With the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, scholars confirmed these texts were once central to Second Temple Judaism. Ethiopia didn't invent them, it protected them. And now, as many leave institutional religion but still seek meaning, these ancient books are speaking again, with fresh power and a bold sense of the sacred. The lost teachings of the risen Jesus. Inside Ethiopian monasteries, a manuscript called the Mashafa Kidan, the Book of the Covenant, was kept for centuries. Written in Ge'ez and passed from monk to monk, it remained unknown to the outside world. Only recently has its message been translated, and it offers something rare: teachings from Jesus during the 40 days after his resurrection. These aren't parables or sermons, they're visions, practices, and spiritual instructions. Jesus speaks of silence as sacred, prayer as geometry, and perception as the path to truth. One line reads, "You ask for proof, but I give you perception. You seek signs, but I give you stillness." This is Jesus as a mystic guide, not a public preacher. He teaches that the soul becomes light, grief becomes understanding, and resurrection is a journey, not an event. These teachings didn't fit the structured theology that emerged after Nicaea in 325 CE, so they were never included in the Western canon. Instead, they echo older Jewish mysticism and early desert spirituality. They speak to the inner life, to transformation, not just belief. And that changes everything. It asks us to see resurrection not as a claim, but as a call, to become something entirely new. Two Christianities. Two questions. As Christianity spread in its early centuries, it found homes in both Rome and Axum. But while both embraced Jesus, they asked very different questions. Rome asked, "How do we unify belief under empire?" Ethiopia asked, "How do we encounter the sacred directly?" That difference shaped two distinct forms of Christianity. Rome built councils, creeds, and centralized control. Ethiopia built monasteries, rituals, and a mystical tradition based on experience, not authority. This is why their Bibles differ. Rome created a structured canon. Ethiopia kept texts like 1 Enoch, Jubilees, and the Mashapha Kidon, books that nurture vision and personal transformation. In the West, Christianity became organized. In Ethiopia, it became embodied in fasting, sunrise prayers, and chants carried by wind across mountain monasteries. As one Ethiopian priest said, "The church is not made of stone, it is made of breath, fire, and water, like creation itself." That's not metaphor, it's lived theology. This wasn't a conflict, it was a branching, two paths from the same root. And today, as millions leave formal religion seeking spiritual depth, Ethiopia's path doesn't feel distant. It feels needed, not just older, but wiser. Next, we explore why these teachings remained hidden from the West for so long. Why the West ignored these texts. For centuries, Ethiopia's sacred Christian texts remained unknown to much of the world, not because they were hidden, but because they were inaccessible. Written in Ge'ez, a liturgical language known only to trained Ethiopian clergy, these books sat in stone monasteries, read by candlelight, preserved with care. Western scholars focused on Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, often overlooking Ethiopia entirely. Its Christian tradition, though ancient and vibrant, was seen as distant or peripheral. As one Ethiopian academic put it, "They studied our architecture and forgot our scripture." Key books like 1 Enoch, Jubilees, and the Mashapha Kidon were unknown in the West until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947. Suddenly, fragments of Enoch found in caves near Qumran matched Ethiopia's full versions. It was a turning point, proof that Ethiopia hadn't altered these texts. It had preserved them. Still, translation was slow. Ge'ez carries layers of symbolism and poetic theology that can't be decoded like math. Only recently have advances in technology and scholarship opened these writings to the wider world. Now, as these texts are studied more seriously, they reveal a Christian voice untouched by Roman editing. a voice that redefines not just Scripture, but how resurrection itself is understood. Resurrection as initiation, not just event. In most Western traditions, resurrection is a historical moment, proof that Jesus rose from the dead. But in the Ethiopian texts, especially the Mashafa Kidan, the 40 days after resurrection are described as a period of deep, mystical teaching. Jesus doesn't just return. He shows his followers how to see differently. Resurrection here is not a one-time miracle, but a path of awakening. Jesus speaks of the body becoming a vessel of light, of perception shifting through silence, posture, and elements like sunlight, wind, and fasting. One line captures it clearly. Those who walk after the sun, but never see its light, have not yet risen. This is resurrection as transformation, not just event. It's the move from hearing a story to living a new kind of life. Salvation becomes less about belief and more about becoming, not a moment of being saved, but a lifelong process of learning to see. For many today, disillusioned with institutions but still craving depth, this vision resonates. It reframes resurrection as something to participate in, not just accept. And it prepares us to ask a deeper question. What else have we missed in this forgotten path? Why this resonates today. Across the Western world, more and more people are stepping away from organized religion, not out of disbelief, but from a desire for something deeper. It's not faith they're rejecting, but formulas. They're looking for experience over doctrine, mystery over control. And in that search, the Ethiopian tradition speaks clearly. Ancient texts like 1 Enoch, Jubilees, and the Mashafa Kidan don't just offer beliefs, they offer practices. Silence, fasting, sacred breath, these echo the same tools used today in spiritual retreats and meditation circles. They don't preach rules, they guide transformation. As one theologian put it, the future of faith will look more like Ethiopia's past. That past is not rigid or dogmatic. It's rhythmic, visionary, and embodied. It offers space for beauty, stillness, and direct encounter with the divine. Preserved for over 1,600 years, these texts now feel strikingly modern. They don't ask, "What do you believe?" They ask, "How do you see?" And for many today, that shift from belief to perception is everything. Which brings us to the final and most personal question. If these teachings are true, what do they change in Christianity, in history, and in us? What this changes about faith. For centuries, Christianity's origin story has focused on Jerusalem, Rome, and later Europe. But the full picture cannot be told without Axum, without the monks, priests, and scribes of Ethiopia who carried a living tradition outside the gaze of empire. This isn't just a footnote, it's a foundational truth. Christianity is older, broader, and deeper than the Western canon alone. The implications are enormous. First, it means the biblical canon is not fixed. It was shaped by decisions, debates, and cultural forces, and different communities preserved different truths. Ethiopia's version of the story didn't lose its authenticity by being separate. If anything, it kept a purer stream, unfiltered by imperial politics. Second, it shifts the center of spiritual formation from doctrine to transformation. The emphasis is not on agreement, but on awakening, not on theological correctness, but on spiritual practice, prayer, vision, fasting, and presence. One monk wrote, "To know Christ is not to memorize his words, but to become his echo." Finally, it opens a door for spiritual seekers today. It tells them they're not alone, that the longing for direct encounter, The desire to touch the sacred without needing permission, that's not a new rebellion. It's an ancient return. The teachings preserved in Ethiopia offer a way forward, not by reinventing the faith, but by recovering what was always there. So what does this change about faith? It makes it wider, it makes it older, and it makes it more intimate. It reminds us that resurrection is not just something to believe in, it's something to become. And now that these voices are finally being heard, the question is not, can we accept them? It's, are we ready to be changed by them? This isn't a new gospel. It's a lost voice, finally heard. The resurrection, as preserved by Ethiopian monks, invites not belief, but awakening. A call to see, not just to follow. And now that it's been translated, the real question is, what will we do with a truth that was never gone, just unread?